Hello, how are you doing? Welcome back to the channel and another video. In today's video, I'm going to be looking ahead to the opening round of fixtures in the Gallagher Premiership. We are going to have rugby this weekend, so I'm going to go through each matchup and do a little preview and say who I think is going to win those games. So remember, if you're new here, hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment who you think is going to win this weekend or anything else that I touch upon. It's always great to hear from you. So first off, I guess the first thing to say is we do have rugby this weekend. This has been a really strange time for the country generally and also for sport, as sport's kind of scrambled over the last 24 hours, not quite, just under 24 hours following the death of the Queen to work out what they were going to do. We've seen the Premier League in football, for example, cancel all of the fixtures, same with the EFL. Some sports are coming back. And we weren't sure what was going to happen with rugby, but the call eventually came, a little bit delayed, but eventually came that there will be rugby this weekend. There's no rugby tonight. Tonight is Friday. As I'm recording and posting this video, we were supposed to have a couple of fixtures with Bristol against Bath and Sale against Northampton. They have both been moved, so all the matches are happening over the weekend rather than happening today. Not going to get into that too much. I think it's one of those situations where, in my opinion, there wasn't a wrong decision here from Premiership Rugby. If they had decided to completely cancel all of the games, I think people would have understood why. But as things are, I know a lot of people are really pleased that they are going ahead as things stand. It's a shame we don't have any on a Friday night, but at least those matches are happening. Also, just in terms of a little bit of admin around what you might expect this weekend, all of the games will commemorate the Queen. There'll be a minute silence, and then coaches and players have the options of wearing black armbands should they want to as well. I'd imagine we'll see most people, most of the players and coaches with black armbands. So in terms of the fixtures, Saturday, we've got 3 kicking off at 3, Exeter Chiefs against Leicester, London Irish Worcester, and Newcastle Falcons against Harlequins. Then Bristol Bath, that is supposed to be tonight on the Friday, is happening at 5:30 on Saturday evening. And then we have 2 games on Sunday. We've got Gloucester against Wasps and Sale Northampton, also moved from Friday. They're both 3 p.m. kickoffs. So we've got rugby. Let's get into it. I'm going to go through each game, pick out just some things that I think are interesting, some bits of team news, some more general stuff, and then give my idea of who I think is going to get a result. So first of all, let's start with Exeter against Leicester. Arguably the game of the weekend, I think. Exeter Chiefs, as I've touched on in a previous video, disappointing last season. It was the first time in 6 years that they didn't make the playoffs, so they're looking to rebound. And Leicester Tigers, of course, the defending champions, superb run to the Premiership final, superb victory in last season's competition. So I just think it's a really fascinating matchup at Sandy Park. And of course, as well, with Exeter, they've had their big rebrand. They're still Exeter Chiefs, but they've changed their logo. All the bars and things around the club have changed as well. So it's kind of a new era for the club in that way. And it's also a new era for the club in the coaching structure as well. Exeter fans watching this would have already been aware of this, but some of you may not realise that Rob Baxter, who's been the director of rugby there for a long, long time, is still there, is still the kind of head honcho at the club, but he's taking more of a back seat. So from what I can understand, is he's being less hands-on through the week, and in terms of the overall club, all the big decision-making still goes through him. But it's going to be Ali Heifer, who's been a coach there for a long time, who certainly on match days at least is going to be the one making the calls in-game. And again, Rob Baxter is going to be travelling up to all the games. He'll go to away games and everything else, but he won't necessarily be travelling with the squad. Personally, I think it's a little strange, or maybe that's being unfair, but it's interesting to see what's going to happen there, because Baxter's still the main man, but not necessarily on match day. I don't know, we'll see. Let's see how it goes. In terms of team news for Exeter, I picked out a couple of bits. Joe Simmons is starting, but he's starting at fullback. We've seen him at fly half a huge amount. Really struggled last year. He was superb in the double winning season when Exeter won the European Cup and the Premiership. He kind of spearheaded that from a fly half point of view and game management point of view. Struggled last season. We saw him coming off the bench a lot, and he hasn't played much at fullback. I think his last appearance in the Premiership, at least, was back in November, but even then he wasn't playing regularly at fullback. He just happened to for that game. So I think it'll be intriguing to see how he goes. Christ Chiunza as well, the young back rower, already a Wales international. He's got a couple of caps for Wales. And I thought he must have already started a Premiership game. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, particularly Exeter fans. I think this is his Premiership debut, his first start, I beg your pardon. His first start in the Premiership. He's at 7, really exciting young guy. So again, I think it'll be good to keep an eye on him and see how he goes. As for Tigers, none of their 5 England players are going to be involved, but there are debuts for Jimmy Gopperth and James Cronin as well. They're both starting, and then also Ollie Cracknell, Joe Tuafete and Phil Thokinasinger are on the bench. They could all make their debuts as well for the Tigers. You're going to see me, by the way, look down at my notes a lot in this video because I've had to go through all the team news and try and work out what I think is interesting and what's not. So apologies for that. I won't be staring at the camera quite as much as usual. As for the game, Exeter against Leicester, I'm going to go for a Leicester win. I thought they were just so good last season. In my prediction video for top 4, which is on the channel, if you haven't seen it, you can go and find that out. I do have Exeter in the top 4. I think they will have a good season. But as for this matchup, I'm just going to give it to the Leicester Tigers. Could well be wrong. On to the next game, London Irish against Worcester. It's the match that I'm going to be at as it happens. Bits of team news. Ollie Hassel-Collins on the wing for London Irish. Ratuni Yarawa has joined from Northampton Saints. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a really good acquisition for London Irish. He's on the bench, so we could see him make his debut. And Harry Arundel as well on the bench as well. We've all been so impressed with over the last kind of 12, 18 months or so. As for Worcester, they have given starts to 4 of their signings. 4 new faces. Cameron Neild, who also actually captains the side. Ted Hill is injured, so that's a bit of a concern for Worcester. Valery Morozov as well in the front row, as well as Haim Faiva and Fergus Lee Warner as well, also makes his debut. So a number of debutants, a number of former Sale guys as well there in Neild and Morozov linking up with their former director of rugby, Steve Diamond as well. A couple of injuries for the Warriors, Finn Smith and Duan van der Merwe, both out, both fairly significant absentees as well. And also just in terms of the last time that Worcester travelled to Brentford to play there, it was that Premiership Cup final where it went to extra time and then eventually it was a draw and it was on tries scored and it was all a bit of a farce in my opinion. But Worcester did get the victory. But the backdrop to all this, of course, is Worcester and their financial issues, administration. The fact they've got to the start of the Premiership season is great news. Has all the stuff off the field with players and even, you know, members of backroom staff at the club not being paid, or the players have now been paid, but the backroom staff have got only a fraction of their wages. How big an impact has that had? Or could it have a galvanising effect? Could it bring everyone together? It wouldn't surprise me if it did do that. But despite that, London Irish at home, they played some really good stuff last year. I'm going for a London Irish win. On to Newcastle against Harlequins. Harlequins have their longest away trip domestically of the season first up. I guess that might be quite a nice thing to get it out the way. Dave Walder is the new director of rugby for the Newcastle Falcons, taking over from Dean Richards. Debut at scrum half for Josh Barton for the Newcastle Falcons. He's joined them from Coventry, another great example of the Championship being a brilliant breeding ground for the Premiership. And also 20-year-old Phil Bartingham, I think it is. I might have written that down wrong. My handwriting is so terrible. But a young 20-year-old for the Falcons is making his debut in that front row. As for Harlequins, Dombrandt is the captain. Big season for Alex Dombrandt. I think, you know, Billy Vunipola established himself on England's tour as Australia once again as England's number 8, England's number 1 in that position. Dombrandt had been sneaking in there. He's coming back from injury. Injury is a part of a reason he didn't go on that tour. So he's got a big season ahead of him with the World Cup at the end of it, I think. So we'll see a good season, I think, from Alex Dombrandt. That would be my prediction. Quins as well, they had such a good scrum last year. I think that's going to be the case again this year to give them platform. In terms of this game, I'm going to go for a Harlequins win. I think Newcastle, a lot of predictions I've seen have Newcastle propping up the table. Unfortunately, now there's no relegation, but I think Newcastle might struggle. Harlequins, I think, are going to win. I need to keep rattling through these. So Bristol against Bath, that game that was supposed to be on the Friday night, but is now happening on Saturday evening. Genge and Kyle Sinclair, the England internationals, starting in the front row for the Bears. AJ McGinty is on the bench. Callum Sheedy is starting at fly half. I think it's significant this year for Bristol, though, that they've got a guy like McGinty or Sheedy, depending on which one of them starts. They've got an established Premiership fly half and an international that can come off the bench and still control games. I think that was a point of weakness. Certainly last season when they struggled so much, they didn't have that kind of controlling figure coming off the bench. So I think that's quite important. Excited to see how AJ McGinty goes in a Bristol jersey. And then the back row, Sam Jeffries, Jake Heenan and Magnus Bradbury making his debut in the back row. Mentioned in the last video I did that Fitzharding, Stephen Luatua, they've got quite a few injuries in there. So it's not too surprising that that is the back row that they've had to go with. As for Bath, it's a new era. Johan van Gram comes in, new director of rugby. For years, Bath on paper have had a brilliant squad to then not deliver at all when it really matters. So they're a little bit of an unknown, I think. I look at the squad they've selected. It's by no means their strongest squad. There's plenty of names to come back into the fold there. So on paper, it's not as strong. But as I say, I just think there's a real element of unknown about Bath. They won at the Rec the last time these two sides met last season. But despite that, I am going to go for the Bristol victory. And just one final point on this game as well. It was supposed to be on TV on Friday. It's now not on TV at 5:30, and it's also not available via the Premiership Rugby TV, which I don't know why. I presume the reason it's not on BT is some logistics from BT's end. Why it's not on Premiership Rugby TV, I'm not too sure, but that's a real shame. I know things have happened and developed really quickly, but fans who aren't going to the game now just aren't able to watch it, which I think is a massive disappointment, really. Okay, on to the Sunday games. Two more to get through. Firstly, Gloucester against Wasps. I like the look of the Gloucester backline. That was what I wrote down. You've got the likes of, Atkinson and Thorley and Reece Samit and just a really solid, good backline. When you marry that in with the fact they had a brilliant driving maul last year, in that predictions video, I have Gloucester in my top four. I think they could well break into it this season, just because I think they're doing good stuff. I'd like to see them kick on. And also they have a really settled squad. Albert Tuasui is probably their only real signing, certainly the only big name signing. He's come over from London Irish and adds more depth to their whole pack. So settled squad, they look good on paper. Good coach in George Skivington, who's made real progress there. I like Gloucester this year. As for Wasps, well, they've had their own financial difficulties. They've slowly lost a number of their big name stars. I actually don't think their squad is as poor as perhaps people expect it to be. In that you still look at it and Launchbury, Barbary, Brad Shields, a lot of guys in there who are good players, Minozzi, players like that, but they have lost the likes of Fekater and some big name stars. So I think Wasps will be decent. I think they'll be a mid-table team. Unfortunately, I don't see themselves pushing to get back into that top four. But Wasps fans, I will hold my hands up and admit I was wrong if that is the case at the end of the season. I'm going to go here, Gloucester victory. Gloucester at home, good side. Top four prediction for me. So Gloucester get the win. Let's finish up Sale against Northampton. Another one of the rearranged games. Sale, I like Sale's team on paper, but throughout Alex Sanderson's time at the club, and I like him as well. I think he's a really engaging, interesting person when you speak to him and when you hear him in interviews. You look at the side that they've been able to name. Tuolangi's fit, so he's named. Tom O'Flaherty, one of their big signings, comes in from Exeter. They're just I think a good side, despite the fact that they've lost, obviously, Lou Diego and Faf de Klerk, who were two really key figures for them. So we'll see with Sale. I like the look of them, but we could have maybe said that over the last few years, and they didn't get into the top four last season. Also, no Johnny Hill, Rafi Quirk or George Ford. When they get those guys back, they're going to be an even better prospect. As for Northampton, what was it? They won 6 or 7 games on the bounce towards the end of last year in their run to get into the playoffs before they did lose to the Tigers in that semi-final. Probably don't have quite as many, I think, and I don't even mean this as an insult, but as glamorous names possibly. I think they're really good Premiership squad. And of course, with Dowson coming in as their head coach, it's a new coaching structure, a little bit of a new era for the club in terms of young coaches, but guys that know the club, were players there, legends there. So I'm excited to see Northampton. They do have a really poor record at Sale. In their last 10 appearances, They've only won 2 of them. Is a tough ground, to be honest. There's a lot of people that struggle heading up to the AJ Bell. One player for Northampton that I did want to just mention is Sam Graham. He used to be at Bristol, didn't really break into the first team. He got appearances but couldn't establish himself. Went away to the Championship, was brilliant for Doncaster last year. He was in the Championship Team of the Season. I think he was in the running even for the Player of the Championship, and he may well have won it. I probably should have checked that before, but he's that sort of calibre. Brilliant last year. He's on the bench for Northampton. I think he could have a really, really good season, so keep an eye out for him. Just finally here, as good as Northampton were towards the end of last year, I may well be wrong on this. I'm going to go for a Sale victory just because of what I said before. I like the look of that team. This is the one prediction where I'm thinking I might be being a little bit foolish, but I'm going to go for a Sale victory. Okay, so that's all for today's video. A bit of a longer one. Hopefully you didn't mind me looking down at my notes too much, but my memory wasn't good enough. I'm not going to remember all of that. Remember, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Like the video, makes a massive, massive difference. And drop a comment down below. Who do you think is going to win this weekend in those games I've gone through? And just thoughts generally on the game and teams this season. And I'll see you in the next one.